Since the release of the original Gears of War back in 2006, we have been introduced to a lot of interesting characters, from COG and UIR soldiers to Locust, Swarm, and the Lambents. While some became staples and returning characters to the franchise, others weren't given the opportunity to be in the spotlight. This is my list for 10 characters I would like to see added to Gears 5 multiplayer, whether it's as their own character or even a skin for an already existing character. I would be really happy to see them in the game in some way or another. Before I get on to number 10, this list will focus on characters that I don't think have a very good chance of being added. So characters like Coltrane, the Carmine brothers, Paddock, or Queen Mira will not be included on this list, as I believe the odds of them being in the game before the next Gears game is pretty high. With all that being said and out of the way, let's get on to number 10, the Stranded. The Stranded have been part of the game since the very first Gears of War, but besides Aaron Griffin, they have never been playable characters in multiplayer. We know they are capable of defending themselves and using weapons, as Delta Squad is hesitant of entering one of their settlements in the first Gears of War game. And Chaps, a Stranded living in a gas station, even helps Dom and Marcus fight off a Locust ambush with his Boltok pistol and Nasher. Little fun fact, although they have never been playable characters in multiplayer, there are 3 different Stranded, Chaps, Franklin, and Hanley, that were all present in the Gears of War 2 game mode submission as meat flags, where you had to down them and use them as meat shields and carry them to designated locations, all while they sported a Nasher shotgun. In all honesty, I just want an excuse to play as Chaps. At number 9, we have Sofia Hendrick, our first Judgment character on the list. Sofia Hendrick made her first and only appearance in Gears of War Judgment. Originally, she was an Onyx Guard cadet. She was assigned to Kilo Squad after the attack on Helvo Bay by Locust forces. Along with Baird, Cole, and Paddock, she helped defeat General Karn during the events of Gears of War Judgment. Since Baird, Cole, and Paddock are all present in the Gears 5 campaign, and Baird was recently added as a character at the beginning of Operation 2, also early leaks show Paddock as a playable character in Escape, and Cole being, well, he's Coltrane. It'd be pretty silly not to have him in a Gears game, so we can safely assume that Paddock and Cole will eventually make their way into Gears 5. With that being said, I would really like to see Sofia also make a return in some way to the multiplayer cast, so that we could have all of the original Kilo Squad playable in Gears of War 5. Jason Stratton makes his way onto the list with the number 8 spot. Also known as just Jace, he made his only appearance in Gears of War 3. An experienced COG soldier, having fought in important battles towards the end of the Locust War, such as Operation Midnight and Operation Hollowstorm, and even joining Marcus and Delta Squad during the events of Gears of War 3, I really thought Jace would become a more important character in the Gears of War franchise. He even replaced Dom as player 2 during Act 4 of the Gears of War 3 campaign if you were playing co-op. They didn't even bring him back in Gears of War 4 as a multiplayer character like they did with a lot of other Gears 3 characters, and that's why I would like to see him make a return in Gears 5. We did sort of get an ending to a story in which he became a filmmaker, but I would still like to see him in action in multiplayer. Time for a slightly more obscure character. At number 7, we have Alicia Valera, also known as just Val to her squad mates. She specialized as a COG recon soldier who was assigned to make sure squads were safe. A member of Zeta 6, she helped in the evacuation of Lima and protecting civilians after it came under threat from a krill storm. Val was later killed by Rom while saving a young Jace Stratton. She was introduced to the franchise a few months after the release of Gears of War 3 as part of Rom's Shadow DLC. Unless you were a die-hard fan back in the day and purchased the DLC, you probably didn't even know she existed as a character, as she has not appeared in any other Gears media. She has not been in the comics or the books. I personally know a lot of people that didn't buy all the DLC for Gears of War 3 back in the day, as it was close to $15 after taxes. Many other characters that have had slight appearances in the games have gone on to have larger roles in the books or the comics, but this 3-hour campaign was her only appearance. Also, seeing as she was a recon specialist, it would be really cool to have another sniper role to play as in Horde and in Escape. At number 6, we have our first Locust character on the list. Ukkon made his first appearance in the Rise of Rom comics and will be making his first video game appearance in Gears Tactics. Ukkon was the lead scientist for the Locust and was responsible for supplying the Horde with weapons by using recycled materials. He was also involved in genetic engineering and as a result created the very first Corpser. Seeing as he will most likely be the main villain in Gears Tactics and very little is known of him, it would be really cool to see him added as a multiplayer character in Gears 5. His design is also something that we have not seen be part of any other Locust character, so I think it would bring a nice mix to the Locust / Swarm characters that we already have. Continuing on with the Locust, at number 5 we have General Karn. Karn was the main villain of the Gears of War Judgment video game. He fought at the beginning of the Locust War and was considered the most dangerous enemy the COG had ever faced. Karn was responsible for planning Emergence Day along with Rom and Scourge and even led the assault on Halvo Bay. He was eventually killed by Kilo Squad. Karn was a master strategist who used his intelligence over physical strength in order to succeed in battle. Sadly, Karn made his only appearance in Judgment, which is considered by many to be the worst game in the series. And to make matters worse, for some reason Judgment decided to exclude all Locust characters from multiplayer, so he was not even a playable character in the only game he appeared in. As far as looks, I think he has one of the most interesting designs of a Gears villain. Being a mix between a Theron Guard and a Cantus, I would really like to see him make a return as a playable character. Up next, we have possibly the most interesting and rarest character ever added to Gears of War. The Epic Reaper takes the number 4 spot. The Epic Reaper was a non-canon enemy introduced in Gears of War Judgment. Yes, this is our third Gears of War Judgment character on the list, and although Judgment might not have had the best gameplay, I do believe it introduced us to some really interesting characters. With that being said, the Epic Reaper was a character that many players were actually aware of, but not very many people even saw him in multiplayer lobbies, and even fewer players ever actually got to play as him. The reason for this being is that only Epic employees had access to this character, as well as a very, very small selection of players known for their contribution to the Gears of War community. The only downside being that these community members only had access to the character for 1 week. As a result, not very many people were given the opportunity to play as or even play against the Epic Reaper. For anyone that played Judgment and was aware of this character, you might remember that he played slightly different. He was slightly bigger than your normal character model, he was able to glide around the map, had a long dash instead of a roll, and had an instant kill scythe melee attack. And one of his coolest things in my opinion was that his skull would light on fire as you got kills. Obviously, these mechanics would have to be removed in order to make him an actual playable character in Gears 5, except maybe the skull catching on fire. That part was pretty cool. That part can stay. We've made it onto our top 3, and taking our bronze medal is our second Zeta 6 squad member, Michael Barrick. He also made his first appearance in Gears of War 3 DLC Realm's Shadow. But unlike Val, he actually played a more crucial role in the franchise, making various appearances in multiple issues of Gears of War comics and the books. Barrick was originally a Stranded that joined the COG army through the Operation Lifeboat program. This was a program that promised safety to families if they enlisted. He was eventually assigned to Delta 1, where he sacrificed himself in order to save the rest of the squad. Michael Barrick was best described as the Marcus Phoenix of Realm's Shadow by developers, and he even wears the same model armor as Marcus. His personality isn't quite a mirror of Marcus's personality, so if he doesn't manage to come back into the game as his own character, it would be interesting to see him at least be made into a skin for Marcus Phoenix. Fun fact about Michael Barrick, he is the only character in the Gears of War franchise to be seen with a cigar in his mouth. However, the cigar is actually never lit. It is only lit once during the end of the Realm's Shadow DLC as a token gesture from Jace. This is due to the developers being very anti-smoking, and they've decided not to incorporate any tobacco products into his games. It's still baffling to think that smoking is not allowed in his games, but ripping somebody in half with a chainsaw is. Our runner-up with the number 2 spot is the Savage Locusts. The Savage Locusts were locusts that survived the flooding during the end of Gears of War 2 and made their first game appearance in Gears of War 3. Having lost their home underground and the guidance of Queen Mira, these locusts decided to make their way to the surface and reverted to a more tribalist mentality rather than that hive mentality they had while living in the hollows. They now reject the queen symbol and have become accustomed to living above ground. As a result, they now don a more post-apocalyptic look that suits their new way of living. They made a return in Gears of War 4 as multiplayer characters, and I personally think this is the coolest the Locusts have ever looked. Even if they don't bring back all the Savage Locusts, I would at least like to see the Marauder and the Grenadier Elite. In my personal opinion, those two were the best Savage Locusts that came from Gears of War 3. And finally, at number 1, this character has made an appearance or has been mentioned in some way or another in just about every Gears of War game, comic, and book, but has never been a playable character. I'm talking about Nassar Embry, the man responsible for founding the Coalition of Ordered Governments, also known as the COG. We can see portraits and statues of him throughout the game, as well as his armor in Gears of War 4. However, Nassar Embry or any of the Allfathers have never been playable characters in Gears of War. He does come from a time before the Pendulum Wars, and seeing as he is holding a sword as a weapon, it's possible he never even used a Lancer. In my opinion, canon can just be thrown out the window when it comes to multiplayer. We have Bautista fighting alongside Halo and Terminator characters, so I don't see why adding Nassar Embry would be a problem. From the portraits and statues, we can see that his armor has a very unique design. Having him be in multiplayer would be an interesting way to bring a new style of character that still fits with the lore of Gears of War and is not from a different game. Well, there you have it. That is my list for 10 characters that I would like to see added to Gears 5. Let me know in the comments below what characters you would like to see in Gears 5, whether it's a high profile character like Coltrane or maybe a more obscure one from the comics. I want to know who you want to play as. This video was a ton of fun to make. It's different than the usual videos I work on, but if you enjoyed it, please leave a like and subscribe for more similar content, as I think I'll definitely be making more videos like this. And if you're interested, follow me on Twitter to get any updates on videos I'm working on or just any random stuff that I may tweet out. All that will be in the description below if you're interested. As always, hope you have a good one and catch y'all next time.